Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial. My name is Ilya and today we are going to discuss how to translate your Vue-3 application into multiple languages. The source code and the textual version will be available as well. You can find these links under the description section. So this tutorial is brought to you by Lokalise, the localization and translation platform. Make sure to check it out because we have lots of cool stuff. We have various integrations with third-party services, ability to manage your translations, to request professional translations, and so on and so forth. You can try it for free without entering a credit card. Alright, so let's get started. Make sure that you install Node 16 or above, and then you can run the following command. It may ask to install some additional dependencies, so if it asks, just say yes. Okay, let's give it the following name. We don't need TypeScript, but well, of course you can use TypeScript if you'd like, but well, it's not mandatory. But we will actually require the router, well, because we are going to store the locale inside the URL, and actually we're going to implement lots of interesting things. So for example, we're going to see how to lazily load your translation files and many other cool stuff. Okay, now let's copy these commands and we are going to run them one by one. So, well, while everything is being installed, let's actually open our newly created app. So we can see there is a demo view. I'm going to replace it with the following markup. So just some demo content to translate. Then let's provide some demo content here as well. And also I'm going to tweak the app view like this to remove all this extra stuff. Well, actually we can also get rid of this style sheet. Well, you can use any style sheet as you'd like, but for simplicity purposes I'm not going to use any. Then inside the components we can actually remove all these guys, and we're going to create nav.view, and so that's going to be our navigation. So those two links are already available for us. So you can see here are those two routes. And so this navigation can be used right away. So to use this thing, we can add it to app view like this, and we can use it right here. Great. Then, well, one important thing that I would like to fix is to add the following prefix, because we're going to use a vue application, and so, well, those environment variables should be prefixed with vue. Then let's add this environment variable, and basically we are good to go. So now we should install two plugins. So this unplugin and the main star, that's vue-i18n. So make sure to add these two guys. Okay, so the server is actually started, which means that everything is working more or less okay. Now let's install these new plugins, and the next thing we should do is we should configure our app. So this config should be updated like this. Well, you can check the source code on GitHub to learn more, but all in all you should include this import, line 5, and this thing. So this has to be included as well to configure the i18n. So make sure to save this file. And now we're going to create a new directory called i18n, and inside there should be index.js. And let's import this create i18n function, and let's actually start creating this instance. There are some important things that we should add here. First of all, that's our locale. So that's our website language, the primary language, the default language, and That's going to be English, for example, but you can choose any other locale as you'd like. And next we should provide, well, we can provide the fallback locale. The fallback locale will be, for example, Russian, but you can use any other locale as you'd like. Finally, let's say legacy. We must set it to false because we are using Vue 3. So, well, in order to configure this plugin properly, we must say legacy false, so make sure to add this option. Alright, then what else? Now we can actually use this create i18n inside the main.js file, and we can create our app by using this plugin. So here we go, that's great. Another thing that I would like to do is I would like to replace this line with this one. Because I'm going to use this ECMAScript modules bundler, it is actually a recommended thing to do, so you may use other bundler as you like, but maybe in that case you will need to provide more configuration. So, well, if you'd like to follow along, make sure to include this line to main.js. Then let's see how to perform the actual translations. So, well, our job is to actually take these hard-coded strings and extract those to separate file, basically. So these texts they should not be hard-coded anymore. They should live in a separate file, and here we're going to use special translation keys, special placeholders that will be replaced with the actual text once the application is served to the end user. Alright, so here let's create a new constant called messages, and these messages, so those are the hard-coded texts that we should translate. And now you can provide actually additional translations in other languages. For example, let's say Russian. Here we go. Great. Now these messages can actually be used right here by saying messages, and that's it. Now, how do we use these translation keys? The first option is to include a script with the following content. So you can import use i18n from the plugin and then extract this t function. So that's a function that performs the actual translation. Then you can expose this function for the template, and then you can actually use your translation keys, for example, in the following way. So you say t and provide the name of your key. If the key is nested, then you are going to use this dot notation. For example, the home is like a namespace and the header is like a key. And here we can see that, well, home, header, so, well, here is our translation key. The same can be done, for example, for this created by, and now our translations should be displayed. But perhaps it's, well, not very convenient to provide this script in all the views, well, in order to translate something. So another option is to actually comment this out and proceed to this index.js file, and here you can say global injection and set it to true. And in this case, all the goodies for i18n should be included into your views and into your components. And once this option is here and set to true, because by default it's false, you can say t with this $sign, meaning that's a global function, global thing. And now you can utilize this function everywhere without the need to import anything, any additional code. Let's do the same for about us, and we're good to go. Yeah, actually, let's also translate our outer links, because they should be, you know, translated into 2 languages as well, and that's it. At this point, we can actually try to run our application and make sure that it's working. So here you go, everything works, but well, those are just simple text. We can see that they are displayed in the following way. We can try and actually, you know, switch the default locale inside our config, and now it is translated. Yay! That's great. Well, of course, we're going to introduce language switching functionality a bit later. Now let's discuss some advanced features that we can use in our translations. And the first feature that I would like to show you is the ability to interpolate some text inside your translation. So, for example, it says here localize. Maybe I can replace it with a placeholder called company. So that's like a variable. And then when I'm using this translation key, I should provide the actual value for this placeholder. And so it is going to be interpolated on this position and do the same thing for all other keys in all other languages. Now just proceed here. And the second argument should be an object. Here the key is the name of your placeholder, and the value is like the name of the company. Then if we're going to return to this page, we can see that Localize is indeed displayed. Alright, another important thing is pluralization. So this is important because, well, for example, here we say this page has been visited 30 times. But if we use one here, we should say one time, right? And if we're speaking about Russian, then pluralization rules are even more complex. There can be multiple choices, and so we should support this pluralization somehow. So out of the box, the i18 plugin actually supports English pluralization, but all other languages, well, unfortunately, they are not supported, and so it's your job to write pluralization rules. Well, so I believe those rules can just be found on the net. And here's one example. So let's create the rules directory and let's say pluralization JS. And here are the Russian rules. Nothing too complex actually. Make sure to export it as RU and then this function. And then we can actually use those rules inside the index file right here. So make sure to import it. Copy the plural rules and use it right here. So now we can pluralize something, which is great. And so first of all, let's provide the translation key and the value for the English language. So it should be for the home namespace. And here we go. So the key is num visits, and then we are providing all the options, all the possible choices, separating those with this pipe symbol, this pipe character. So like 0 visits, 1 visit, and then finally many visits. And please note that the placeholder must be named n or count, so that everything works correctly. So you have like two choices here. Now let's do the same for the Russian locale. The idea is like pretty much the same, but we have like many options in this case, but nothing too complex. And then if you'd like to like implement this pluralization, you just use the following approach. So there is no need to provide a name for the placeholder. You just provide this number and everything should work. Well, let's check it out by visiting our application. So 30 times. Now let's maybe say like 0 times. So no visits so far. And it says this page hasn't been visited. Well, great. Now, the next thing that I'm going to show you is the ability to work with numbers and currencies. Let's say numbers.js, and you can provide these formatting rules. So additional information can be found in this document. And just, well, go ahead and read about it a bit more. Then, well, let's actually use these formats for our currencies, for dollars and for rubles. Let's open i18n. Let's open this index thing and let's use number formats like this. And well, at this point we are ready to get rolling. For example, let's display how many donations we have raised, and to achieve that, we're going to say donations raised, and that's our placeholder that is going to contain the actual sum. All right, let's provide donations here. So same placeholder, that's important. And now we can actually display our sum inside the About view in the following way. So to localize the currency, you should use this n function, provide a number, and then provide the name of the format that should be utilized. That's pretty much it. So now let's save it. Let's proceed to the About page, and we can see now it's formatted as dollars. Great job, great job. And the final thing to discuss here is, working with date and time. So let's create datetime.js, and here are two different formatting rules. So the short format and the long format. So in this case, we are displaying only the date, and in a very short, concise way, and the long format is going to contain lots of additional info. Same thing here. Of course, you can create additional formats and make it much more complex. You can read more information in this document about all these supported formats, about formatting rules, etc., etc. Now let's import this thing like this. Let's copy the datetime format and use it here. And let's display the current date in the following way using the d function. Then you provide the date object, and then you provide the format. Then once you're ready, just save the changes, proceed to the main page, and guess what? It is localized properly. Great job. Now let's actually do the following thing. Let's extract all our translations into separate files, into separate JSON files. It is actually a recommended thing to do. Why? Because first of all, it's a bit hard to manage all the translations in a single file, because currently, all the translations live here. But if you're going to have like 100 keys or hundreds and hundreds of keys, it will be very hard to navigate those, so this file is going to be really large. So that's the first problem. Another problem is that if you're going to work with professional translators, they probably should not modify your source code files directly, because they might break something by mistake. And that's why I'm proposing to include those translations inside these JSON files. And the third thing to mention is that later we're going to introduce lazy loading, and so those files are going to be loaded on demand. Alright, so having done that, let's return to this file. And we should actually import our translations from those JSON files in the following way, and then make sure to include those in the following way. So now everything is great. Visually nothing is going to be changed, so those translations are still here. But if you take a look at Network tab, you're going to see two files were imported, which means that everything is working great. The next thing that I would like to introduce is the ability to switch between languages. Therefore, let's create a new component called language switcher.view. So inside this component, let's do some groundwork. And the next thing that I would like to discuss is how exactly we are going to display all the available locales. Because, if we're going to provide a language switcher, then obviously it should contain all the locales that are currently supported. The simplest thing to do is to extract available locales from this vue-i18n. And it's going to work. Why? Because when we are creating this i18n object, we are loading all the messages for all the locales, And so as long as those messages are loaded, we can indeed understand what locales are supported, right? But well, there is one problem, because later we are going to introduce lazy loading. And so if the locales are lazy loaded, it means that initially only a single locale is going to be available, right? And it means that basically available locales will be an array of a single element, and that's not ideal, shall we say. That's why I'm proposing to actually introduce yet another environment variable in the following way. So that's going to be a list of all the locales that we can theoretically support. And even if those locales are lazy loaded, that's not a big problem. Then inside this directory, let's create the translate.js file with the following content. That's going to be our helper with different methods that is going to do the heavy lifting for us. So it's going to manage the languages, it is going to manage language switching, it is going to read user preferences, and so on. And for now, we're going to create a single getter function that will return the supported locales as an array by splitting this string in the following way. And having done that, we can import this thing inside the language switcher. And now let's actually read the supported locales, and let's return those supported locales. Great job. The next question is, how do we actually manage the locale switching? So how exactly it should be implemented? Well, one possible solution is, to use the locale object, because that's a complex object that can be used as a model, and we can actually watch the change of this object. So for example, you could have written something like that, provide the model, then provide all the locales, and so once the locale is modified in this select dropdown, we should actually switch the locale. So for instance, you can say watch, and then here you just switch the locale and everything should be great. And actually that should work. But once again, if we are going to implement lazy loading, then it means that not all the locales will be immediately available. That's why this approach is not ideal, I would say. And instead, let's use another approach. So we should create a new function called switch language. It should be an asynchronous function, because inside we're going to load new translation files on demand. So here we will listen to the change event for the select tag, and once this event fires, we should understand what is the new locale. So let's say event target value. Then let's await and use switch language. That's a function that we're going to write a bit later. And we're passing this new locale. Now let's expose all the necessary objects, and now we can actually build the select tag, this drop down. So that's an onChange event that calls our function. Then we are displaying all the supported locales in the following way, and we are translating the locale code into English or into Russian. To translate something, let's first of all save the changes, and now let's open locales in JSON. Let's provide this locale here. Then let's provide this thing here, and more or less we are ready. So now this component can be utilized inside maybe navigational component right here. Let's add the script, and let's add the language switcher in the following way. But we still haven't written the actual switch language function, so let's do it now. So to do that, I'm going to create a setter called current locale. It's going to accept in your locale, and then there is an important thing to do. We must access this global object to set the new value for the locale. That's why we must import all the necessary stuff from the index file inside the vue-i18n folder. And now we can add this function, and let's use this setter to actually set the locale. And also I'm going to update the language attribute for the HTML tag on the page. That's it. That's it. Great job. And yeah, actually, you know what? I'm going to call this file not translate, but translation, like this. Yeah, one thing I forgot to specify this donations placeholder when moving those translations inside the translation file. So let's fix that, and now those donations are displayed properly. Great job. But well, you know, there are two additional issues with our application, because we always use the English locale by default without checking for the user preferences, and once the user switches the locale, we do not store the preferred language for our application. Well, first of all, let's actually store the preferred locale inside the translation file. Right here, we're going to use local storage and persist this locale. And then, well, once the user opens the application, I would like to actually try and guess which locale he or she is trying to request. First of all, let's create the following helper called isLocaleSupported, which will simply, you know, read this array and see if this array includes the requested locale. Then the next thing is to read user preferences sent by the browser, because as you probably know, browsers can send user locales inside window navigator language. So let's do the following thing. So we're trying to read navigator language and navigator user language. If well, those languages are not available, we're going to use the default locale. And then I'm going to do this interesting thing. So we're going to return the locale itself and the locale, but without the regional code. Because, you know, the locales can be sent in two ways. It can be just EN, or it can be maybe EN-US, or it can be FR, and it can be FR Belgium, you know. And so I would like to check both cases, so whether we can support this locale, or perhaps we can support this locale. That's why we are returning both options here. Great. And finally, let's create another helper to read the persisted locale from the local storage. And to do that, we will simply, you know, read this persisted locale, check if it's actually supported, because maybe the user is trying, you know, to mess with our application and, you know, provide some locale that is not supported at all. And so if it's not supported, we are going to say just, you know, null. And that's it. That's it. So now we can actually create the main method to guess the default locale that should be set in our application once the user opens the page. The first thing we need to do is we need to check if we have a persisted locale, and well, if it's supported, then we just return this locale and that's it. If there is no persisted locale, or this persisted locale is not supported, we're going to read the preferred locale from the browser. And then we should check like both options. So the locale with the regional code and without the regional code. And we're just doing this return. And if neither locale is supported, we're going to return the default locale. And the last thing we should do is we actually should create a getter to get the default locale. And it's just our environment variable that we have already provided right here. Okay, great. That's pretty much it. But, well, there is one problem, because this guess default locale method is not being called anywhere. Yeah, I understand, but we will fix it in a moment. For now, let's actually see if the locale is persisted when I switch the language. Let's open store, local storage, and so this locale is right here. Then when I switch it, it is being replaced to English. Well, now before fixing this guess default locale method and calling it somewhere, I would like to actually change our router, because the locale should be available inside the route as well. And to do that, first let's import the router view. Then what else? Then I would like to add a new path, and the path should contain an optional locale attribute, and this should be rendered inside the router view, whereas all the other routes should be marked as children routes. So let's say something like this, and now we should properly, close everything like that. Now we are golden. Yeah, actually those forward slashes must be removed as well, because those are the children routes. So make sure to remove those. You can keep the names, and actually you should keep the names, and that should be it. So the locale should now be set inside the URL. But now I would like to also introduce a beforeEnter hook, and it should delegate to this middleware that we're going to create inside inside translation.js. So let's add this middleware. And this middleware accepts 3 arguments. So 2, where the user is actually navigating from where he or she is navigating, and finally this next function that we're going to use in a moment. We're not really interested in the from argument, but we are interested in 2, because I would like to read this locale from the URL. And let's check if this locale is actually supported, because if it is supported, then we don't need to guess anything, because we already know which locale the user is requesting, right? But if this locale is not supported, then we should guess which locale we should utilize. And once it is guessed, we just, redirect the user to the correct path. But if everything is okay, we just use the requested locale, we switch the language, and we are saying next to navigate the user to the requested page. That's pretty much it. Yeah, and of course, in order to use this middleware, we must import our translation. That should be it. Now let's open our application, let's reload the page and take a look at that. So this en is actually present in the URL. Let's switch to Russian. Well, so the language is switched. I understand that this part is not being changed, but we'll fix it in a moment. But the important thing is that everything is working, and I can actually request this RU version. And you see it is being displayed for me. Yeah. If we take a look at the local storage, we can see that the preferred locale is also RU. Now, what if I'm going to try and request a French version which is not yet supported? In this case, it is trying to guess the locale, and so it has guessed that my preferred locale is RU because, well, we get this value inside the local storage. If you're going to request your website like this, without providing any locale at all, it is also going to try and guess the preferred locale. So great job. Now let's rewrite the locale inside the URL once this locale is switched. So to achieve that, we should use the router, and we should actually get this router constant. And after that, let's open the try section. So after the locale is switched, we're going to try and replace the params with a new locale. And well, if something goes wrong, maybe we can say console error and then just push this root route to the history. Great, that's it. That's it. Yeah, one thing, by the way, is that our router links, they do not include the current locale. So here, this locale is not being interpolated anywhere, and that's actually a problem. And to overcome this problem, we can create a new helper method that is called i18n route. So let's add it here. So it is going to accept the to path, and it will add this locale param to the list of all the params like this, and that's it. So that's a very handy helper, and now we can utilize this helper inside of the nav component. Let's say import tr, and let's do some setup. So after these components, we will do some setup, and we will actually return the tr like that. And having done that, let's actually update this to attribute in the following way, and make sure to include this semicolon. It's very important because I would like to process this part as a code. So now we are using the name for our route. This name is indeed available because we have specified it right here, and so that's why everything should be working fine. And the same should be done for the about link. We're saying about. And yeah, of course, as long as we are using the current locale, I don't think we have such getter yet. Yeah, we don't have a getter, we have a setter. So let's say get current locale, so that's it's available. Now let's reload the page. Let's take a look at our link, and it says RU. Let's switch the locale. It says en, and it says en here in the URL as well. So everything is being refreshed, everything is great, so my congratulations. The final thing that I would like to implement is the ability to lazy load translation files, because currently all the files are being loaded when the application is served to the end user. So those are our imports, but it's actually not required to load all the translations, because, well, if your application supports like 10 languages, most likely your user will not need all 10 languages. It's highly unlikely that they will use all those 10 languages, yeah. So most likely that user will switch to one of the languages, and it should, well, it should be enough. Alright, so let's open the translation.js file once again, and let's import next tick. So we are going to require this function, and then inside the switch language, let's add a new line to load the translation files, the locale messages. That's going to be an asynchronous method that will prepare all the translations on demand. First of all, we should make sure that those translations have not been loaded previously, because if this locale is present inside the available locales for i18n, it basically means that translations for this locale have been already loaded previously, and it means that we don't need to reload them, probably. Of course, you can make this logic more complex if you are using multiple translation files for the same language, but in our case it should suffice. But if this locale is not available, then we should simply use this import instruction, and we should prepare our messages by calling set locale messages in the following way. And then it is very, very important to say next tick, because we must say that everything is ready, so now we can proceed to performing other actions, because otherwise it may happen that your locale messages are not yet ready, even though you have switched the language. Alright, now of course we can remove this thing and this thing, so let's keep only the default messages for the default locale, because we need at least some messages when the application is initially served. And well, I believe that's it. I believe now we can open our application. So here is the English version, and we can see that the English file is being loaded, but the Russian file, no, it's not loaded, it's not there, and that's a good thing. But now if I switch to another language, I can see that this RU has been loaded for us, which is great. But if I keep switching between locales, no files are reloaded because all the messages are already available for us. So that's how you can implement the lazy loading feature. My congratulations, that's it. We have reached the end of this tutorial. I hope that, well, this tutorial was useful and interesting for you. We have covered lots of important things, and now you're basically ready to internationalize your own Vue 3 application. So, well, good luck and happy coding. Once again, you can find all the additional links in the description section. Stay with us, stay localized, and see you in other tutorials.